Hi, I'm DraftKings analyst Geoff Ulrich, and this is the DKTV lineup review for Week 12 of the NFL season. If you're new to the lineup review, we're going to look at the Week 12 winners lineup from DraftKings Big Millionaire Maker tournament. We're also going to look at a lineup that won a $3 qualifying event on DraftKings for their live final last week. We're also going to break down these lineups and see what ideas and strategy points we can take to help us build better lineups in the future. So the Millionaire Maker winner for Week 12 was a player by the name of K-Easy, or Keezy. He had a couple interesting points about this lineup right off the bat. He used a triple stack with Russell Wilson, Thomas Rawls, Doug Baldwin. So he's a quarterback, running back, wide receiver combo. He had two players score under 15 points in his lineup, which is kind of interesting. Just proves that you don't have to nail every position to win these big tournaments. Also had 5 players at 5% owned or less. So it was a real contrarian lineup this week that won, which is also kind of interesting. He targeted a running quarterback. There's only a few true, real dual threat quarterbacks in the NFL that are running, passing sort of combos. Cam Newton and Russell Wilson, two of the best targets for this position. Combined, these two have 11 games where they've scored 30 points or more on DraftKings since the start of the 2014 season. This makes them great targets for tournaments. They can accumulate those run yards really quickly. It's 1 point per 10 yards of rushing. The rushing TDs are worth a little bit more. These guys have great high ceilings for fantasy. They're a little bit more volatile, but with these high point totals and or targeting them in games with high point totals, I should say, and close point spreads, like the Pittsburgh game this weekend, it's a really good idea for tournaments. They're forced to throw a little bit more if a shootout develops, and there's just better potential for big games there. So I really like the fact that he targeted Russell Wilson this week. He's a great big game quarterback. I also really like the fact that he used the triple stack, the quarterback, wide receiver, running back combo. Went with a complete Seattle Seahawks game stack here. 3 players from the same team, Russell Wilson, Doug Baldwin, Thomas Rawls. I like this play for a couple reasons. The first is that it only cost him $14,400 in salary. All 3 players were somewhat underpriced and had good potential in this game, which had a high point total and a close point spread like we already talked about. All these players had good usage or matchups coming in. Doug Baldwin versus the Pitt secondary was a great matchup. Seattle pass game could be a little hit or miss, but at only 3,800, Doug Baldwin was a great target. The Pittsburgh secondary just giving up a big game to AJ Green a few weeks ago. They're definitely susceptible for fantasy, so I really like that. Thomas Rawls was getting all the work. He didn't have a huge game, but at only 4,600, he was a great volume play, so I like targeting him as well. If you're thinking about using this play next week, the Carolina game stack versus New Orleans is definitely something to think about. I think that's going to be a popular play, but it's definitely something you can employ with Cam Newton, Jonathan Stewart, and maybe like a Devin Funchess or a Greg Olsen. Even maybe think about KC versus the Raiders. The Raiders have a pretty weak secondary. And thinking about Alex Smith, maybe Travis Kelce and Jeremy Maclin, it's kind of an interesting contrarian play. Definitely some potential there too. So the third point about this lineup I'd just like to make, he targeted really athletic wide receivers with great matchups. So both Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry, great runners after the catch, and their quarterbacks love them. So they both had great matchups. Redskins giving up a ton of touchdowns to wide receivers in the last few games. 9 touchdowns, in fact, to wide receivers in their last 5 games. The Jets, outside of Darrelle Revis, have also been terrible at covering wide receivers. 10 touchdowns to wide receivers in their last 5 games. I love the fact he targeted these weak secondaries. And now that we have a little bit bigger sample size, I think he can use these defense versus position stats on the DraftKings player cards to help you make these decisions. Next week, if you're looking for this play, Alshon Jeffrey against the weaker San Francisco secondary, it's a great spot for a big game too. Make sure you also check out the weekly DK Playbook article, Wide Receivers versus Cornerbacks Advanced Matchup Targets. There's a lot of helpful tips there too, so I'd really recommend checking out that. Let's look at the $3 qualifier winners lineup now. A player by the name of Mots81 won this week. He used a very similar strategy to the Millionaire Maker winners lineup. He employed a triple Seattle stack as well. Used Russell Wilson alongside Jimmy Graham and Doug Baldwin. Graham unfortunately got injured in this game, but at only 4,800 he had a great matchup too, and I really like the idea there of going with that value play. I think the winners this week showed you that using more than 2 players from a single team is a good way to create high upside lineups. When the game goes for a lot of points, your lineup's going to get that bump. Might not be optimal from the perspective of sometimes these players will be stealing points from each other, but it can lead to those big weeks, which is what we want for tournaments. So He also used my strategy from the last article. He targeted some running backs with really high workloads. TJ Yeldon didn't have a huge game, but he's a very safe play, playing on over 85% of the snaps. Also targeted Adrian Peterson, who's getting a ton of carries. Minnesota's defense, I should say, is playing very well, keeping games close. Peterson's getting a ton of carries right now, which I love. So just in closing for this week's video, make sure you target running quarterbacks in big tournaments. They have great fantasy upside and great ceilings as well. Using full game stacks, quarterback, running back, wide receiver from the same team, that's okay too, especially if there's a good matchup and you're getting good value at all three positions. And then targeting weak secondaries with your wide receiver, that's always a good play too. Use those player scorecards to your advantage. So make sure you subscribe to DKTV, guys. Make sure you check out the Monday Night Sweat Show too. Every week on DKTV, they're having potential Millionaire Maker winners on live as the Monday Night Football game is going on. It's really cool. It's great entertainment. I'd recommend checking it out. My name's Geoff Ulrich, guys. You can follow me on Twitter as @TheFantasyGrind. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Good luck in Week 13, and we'll talk to you again next week.